Shalom and hello to you out there from North America, Europe, Israel. Glad that you are here with us today. Happy Hebrew Love Festival to you all. I don't know if you noticed, but we have a long-lasting tradition of accumulating love festivals from other cultures. The most recent is the Winter Valentine's Day and the Summer Tu B'Av. Yes, even here in Israel, we love to love at least twice a year. So happy holiday. And today, we are fortunate to celebrate it in honor of Professor Yaakov Malkin, who passed away last year. He, in the recent decade, was the provost of the Institute and for the past 20-some years, taught and lectured in many colloquia at the Birmingham Temple and in many places all over the world. Today, we will learn from him and from rabbis that learned with him and have become leaders by their own merit and other leaders of our movement. We will begin by listening to a short excerpt from the 2005 colloquium and then hear from Mrs. Elyse Pivnick, who is one of our most prominent leaders, lay leaders of our movement, a board member of the IISHJ and president of the Pivnick Family Foundation, and a dear friend. We will then hear Rabbi Dr. Adam Shalom, who will follow with his message. I would like to take this opportunity to thank him for assisting in putting together this event and choosing as well as editing the videos we are about to see. Rabbi Adam Shalom is the Dean of the North America of the International Institute for Secular Humanistic Judaism. He's also Rabbi of Kol Chadash Humanistic Congregation in North Suburban Chicago. He lives with his family in Highland Park, Illinois. My name is Rabbi Sivan Malkin Maas, and I am the Dean of Tmura-IISHJ, the IISHJ Tmura-Israel. Josh, could you please start the first video, and right after that, Elyse, if you can join in with your message.
Now, in Israel, there is a very important leader. You heard him speak today. He always speaks words of wisdom. He is the co-dean of the International Institute, and he is, to a great degree, responsible for the wonderful program that exists there. So it's with a deep pleasure and great honor to invite Professor Yaakov Malkin to come forward to share his thoughts at this special graduation.
Friends and colleagues, somehow I get always involved in personal announcements when it comes to graduation. There's an old Jewish saying that no one can be jealous of his daughter and his students. I must admit that I am jealous of my daughter and of my students. Jealous because they are starting a way that I didn't dare to go. The way of secular Judaism and institutionalize the professionalism of secular Judaism.
So, hi everyone, Elyse Pivnick here from Princeton, New Jersey. It is my great pleasure and honor to be taking part in this convening today. I first heard about Yaakov from my parents, Ben and Lorraine Pivnick, and my uncle, who was Rabbi Sherwin Wine. I heard that he had a new beloved friend and colleague in Israel, and I knew, first off, that he was a highly regarded scholar of Jewish history and culture, and, well, a mensch. He's a kind-hearted person ready to help. And that's the highest compliment in our house growing up. I learned years later that daughter Sivan was the one who introduced Yaakov and Sherwin to each other. She was working in suburban Detroit as an emissary to the Jewish Agency, and part of her job was to get to know congregations throughout the Detroit area. As an ambassador of a sort between Israel and the Jewish community of Detroit. She visited the Birmingham Temple and knew right away that she needed to introduce my uncle to her father. It was a fortuitous match. Not only did my uncle gain a friend on many levels, he found someone who became the leader of reestablishing humanistic Judaism in Israel. This was especially important because it proved that humanistic Judaism was not a quirk of Detroit, but that it had a broader audience beyond our city and country. It was important to have attention and leadership from Israel, arguably the most important Jewish secular community in our history. And then, of course, the fortuitous meeting brought us Rabbi Sivan Maas. Sivan had another profession when she met my uncle, but he instantly saw Sivan's potential to be a rabbi and how right he was. In keeping with the theme of this convening, of the connection between art and love, I want to also recognize the work of Elyse Malkin, who back in 1995, in partnership with the International Institute of Secular Humanistic Judaism, curated an important art show in the Detroit area of Jewish figurative art. It showed how important art is in expressing our Jewish experience and helped us further understand our history and culture. Let me close by saying I look forward to continuing collaboration among Tmura, the Society for Humanistic Judaism, and the International Institute for Secular Humanistic Judaism, and between our families. I'm really pleased to be part of this event today. Thank you all.
Hello, and thank you for joining our celebration of the life and work of Yaakov Malkin. I greatly appreciate your participation in this very important event. Growing up, I experienced Sherwin Wine as the intellectual giant of humanistic Judaism. He was brilliant, he had very strong beliefs and convictions, and a very strong voice that was articulating meaningful Jewish communal life for secularized Jews. And he also celebrated an inspirational emphasis on the power and responsibility of human beings independent of a God. Beginning in the 1990s, as I was beginning my work in organized humanistic Judaism, I began to hear another voice, another strong believer, also brilliant, and just as meaningful. I first experienced Yaakov Malkin through the colloquium conferences of the International Institute for Secular Humanistic Judaism, which were held in North America. He and Sherwin had been connected through the good fortune of Sivan's shlichut, or emissary assignment, to metropolitan Detroit. And if I didn't know better, I would have called it beshert, or fate. They became a fantastic working partnership, Sherwin and Yaakov, for well over a decade together. Together, they organized fascinating colloquia conferences through the IISHJ, and also conferences of the International Federation of Secular Humanistic Jews until Sherwin's death in 2007. It's ironic, again, maybe beshert, probably not, that they died on the exact same date in the general calendar, but 12 years apart. Today, though, we are celebrating Yaakov's life, his ideas, his vision, his enthusiasms, and his work. From Yaakov's fantastically prolific mind, as expressed in speech and written words through numerous books and essays, I learned about the importance of poetic truth, treating the Bible as literature and as an expression of the human condition. Israeli Judaism as a beautiful expression of secular Jewish life and culture, and the idea that culture was vitally important, not just ideas and philosophy. And finally, the pursuit of beauty and aesthetics as a path to human fulfillment, thus our theme for today's program. From my many visits to Yaakov and Felice's house and garden on Uziah Street in Jerusalem over the last 25 years, I also experienced warm hospitality, joyful enthusiasm for our shared work, and the special pleasure of enjoying one's golden years surrounded by loving family. Today you'll see some short selections of Yaakov's contributions to IISHJ colloquia from the Institute's YouTube channel, and there's more there to explore if you like what he has to say here. Today you'll hear in his own inimitable way these ideas of the dignity and value of secular Judaism, the importance of the Bible to Jewish culture, the value of poetic truth and its insights into the human condition, and the power of reading and rereading stories. And you'll hear about the last chapter of his creative life over his last 15 years, starting and establishing Tmura-IISHJ to train and ordain secular rabbis, of course in partnership with his daughter Sivan. Perhaps one day there will be a plaque installed in that house at Uzziah, and the plaque will say, "Here Elyse and Yaakov were the grandparents and hosts of something new and wonderful in the Israeli Jewish world, a transplant from North America that took root in Jerusalem and flourished beautifully." And Yaakov never had any doubt that what we were doing, what Sivan and Elyse and Greg and Tzemah and all of our colleagues are doing even now, is very important work indeed. I want to end with a quotation from his presentation on secular Judaism at the Institute's colloquium in 1999. At the end of a marvelous presentation, he said, "I know that we are very small. I know that you can count the people who are engaged in our movement full-time on one hand or maybe two hands. But remember, there was a Jew who had only 12 disciples when he died, and then look what happened." As it says in the biblical book of Proverbs, Zecher Tzadik Livracha, the memory of a good person is a blessing. And so it is.
Thank you, Adam. One of Professor Yaakov Malkin's best-loved literary works was this bestseller, a masterpiece, or what he would call the Bible, or what we would call the Hebrew Bible. He didn't love everything about it, but, well, who does? But in his book, Judaism Without God, Judaism as Culture, Bible as Literature, he talks much about what he did love in the Bible. Today we have the good fortune of meeting Rabbi Dr., you'll hear why I said that twice in a minute, Tzemah Yoreh, who is the rabbi of the City Congregation for Humanistic Judaism in New York City. He attended the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, where he obtained his Ph.D. in biblical criticism in record time. He earned a second Ph.D. in ancient wisdom literature from the University of Toronto for the joy of studying ancient text. He has written many books on biblical narrative and humanist liturgy. Professor Yaakov Malkin was his teacher when he was a rabbinical student here at IISHJ Tmura in Israel and was ordained here. We will now see another excerpt from one of Yaakov Malkin's presentation, followed by Rabbi Yoreh, to be followed by another video by Malkin, discussing the topic of myth and poetic truth, Bible and values.
One of these myths, and the word myth itself has so many meanings, I'll talk only about two of them. One is the myth as the opposite of truth, myth as fiction. But fiction is not always the opposite of truth, because fiction may have a poetic truth, which sometimes is more durable than any historical truth. Because as you heard this morning, historical truth changes all the time. Poetic truth doesn't change. Historical truth, every new archaeological dig can change our view based on previous archaeological digs. But nothing can change the poetical truth of Hamlet, or the poetical truth of Genesis, or the poetical truth of Job, or of Jonah, or of the Song of Songs. But myth also has this meaning of the opposite of truth. Sometimes we say it's a myth, it's only a myth. I am a great admirer of myths, never say it's only a myth, but I admit that some of the myths became quite harmful, like the myth about Judaism being a religion, or Judaism being a monotheistic, moral, exclusive religion, and that it was always like that, and that only in our times we became a pluralistic culture. This is a myth. Judaism was never only a religion, it was always a culture of the people, according to the myths that we know, and this is the other meeting. Judaism had many religions in it, or at least the Jewish people had many religions, at least during the biblical times, again based on the biblical documents, on the biblical literature. And I take the biblical literature as face value because in our culture, the Bible operated, acted, as Heine said, as a mobile motherland. This is the unifying factor of the Jewish nation. The biblical literature is the only literature which is common to all Jews. All post-literature in Judaism became literatures of various trends, of various movements, of various groups. Some of them were the official literature of the rabbinical culture, like the Talmud, for instance. But they were not the official literature or the literature, the national literature of those who were not in the rabbinical circles. Today, the Bible continues to be the unifying identity symbol of the Jewish nation, including secular people who do not believe in so many things said in the Bible, like most religious people who also do not believe in most of the things said in the Bible. Therefore, for me, myth is literature that starts to fulfill certain functions. You turn a story into a myth when the story starts to fulfill functions. When the story starts to fulfill, for instance, the function of unifying and identifying a nation, like the Iliad, Homer, like the Bible. So many things in the Bible.
Tzemah.
Hi, thank you, Toda Sivan. Professor Yaakov Malkin was my teacher. I don't grant that accolade lightly. It's the highest accolade in my lexicon. I do believe, sincerely believe that the Jewish saying, "Ezehu hachacham halamed mikol adam," who is wise, one who learns from every person. But I want to put on a pedestal the people who actually I regard as my teachers. And that's why I'm not going to call him Yaakov, I'm going to call him Professor Malkin, because for me he was Professor Malkin. Even though I had been a professor already, and I could see in some way, shape, or form that we were like colleagues, but he was a giant. So I just want to share what Yaakov taught me, what he taught me about the Bible. So I have to share a little of my personal biography to do that. I've been studying Bible seriously ever since I've known how to read. So ever since the age of 6 or 7, I have been attracted to Bible. And it's been continuous for the past 35 years. So I grew up in a religious home, but I'm also an academic brat, meaning both my parents are professors. And I didn't know as a kid why I liked studying Bible. I just liked it. I liked the stories. I felt attracted to it. I continued studying it. I wasn't at the stage of thinking of like, why am I doing this? That's an introspection which comes with age. I know some of the reasons why not. Like I did not study the Bible. I wasn't interested in the Bible even as a child, because I wanted to know about what God commanded to Israel. But I couldn't articulate anything beyond that. I was never a particular believer. The switch from me being religious to having a more secular identity wasn't because I was always a doubter. I was always a free thinker in that respect. So it had nothing to do. There was nothing to do with God in it. But I still never could articulate why. Like why was it that I wanted to know more about the Bible? This like persisted. Even as a teenager, I was a participant in the international Bible contest in Israel, the חידון התנ"ך העולמי, and Prime Minister Rabin, may he rest in peace, was asked me what my favorite book was. And so I said at that point in my life, I said the book of Isaiah. It was kind of a glib answer, because the book of Isaiah is a favorite of a lot of people. And I talked about its messages of morality. But that wasn't the reason. It wasn't, I couldn't, and there was I would say a deep dissatisfaction, which is part of the experience of people in the humanities in general. Like why do we study these things? Why are we looking into that? And in my biography, I say one of the reasons clearly is for the joy of studying ancient texts. It fulfills it is deeply meaningful to me to study ancient texts. But that doesn't answer the meta question, the why study those ancient texts. And in order to give meaning, in order to structure your life, it is good to answer those meta questions. So after I'd been a professor of Bible for a while, and I moved back to Israel after that job ended, so I became a rabbinical student at Tmura. I had previously studied in the U.S., but I really culturally saw myself as Israeli and got really excited about Tmura's program. And it was finally at Tmura, I didn't take that many, like only really a few classes with Yaakov. So when I finally realized why it was important for me to know Bible, why I felt it was so important. And so it's because, like Yaakov was saying in that clip, the Bible is my story, my myth, my literature, and more importantly, our stories and our myth, and so important to so many people. And I wanted to know where it came from. And I wanted to know how it came into being. And I wanted to know, and more importantly though, I wanted to influence how it was perceived. That was how it affected me. And I wanted other people I wanted to share my insights into it. And so I'd written books before meeting Yaakov, written books about the Bible. But I would say that, the way he framed it deepened my understanding, deepened my writing, deepened my experience. So I'm just about to publish a book that I've worked on for a long time, a popular book called Why Abraham Murdered Isaac, the first stories of the Bible revealed. And in my conclusion, I was forced to ask, why did you write that book, Tzemah? Like, how and why did this book come into being? And I was able to express it because of Yaakov. I was able to talk about it. And I spent my scholarly life trying to find out what the original stories, what the first stories were, uncover the origins of the myths. And I discovered, this great these first stories, this amazing first stratum, first layer of text, and it's these stories about Cain, the murderer, being the father of humanity, about Abraham murdering Isaac, about Jacob having only 7 children instead of 12, about the Israelites never being slaves in Egypt, about there being only 3 plagues and not 10, of there being 7 commandments, of Moses leading the Israelites into the land and not Joshua. All those stories are ones that I discovered, and you saw that the first stories had a lot less God in them. The stories were human stories. The stories were stories where the human beings were the heroes, were the ones doing the things. And you know, that, like, wow, now I know why it was so worthwhile to dig to the origins of these myths, that we can see that in the first iteration, at the first level, in the bedrock of our literature and our tradition, it's the human beings that move things. And that's not to say that, you know, it's not to say for even 1 second that we would agree with what they did, but it is truly, you know, it's inspiring to know that, you know, because you have to dig, because the hero of the Exodus is not Moses, as it's told in today's Bible. The hero is God. But if you dig deeper, you find out that the first hero was Moses. So I don't want to leave here without like a touch of learning. You know, I can't. It would be hard for me to do that. And so I want to share with you just an insight about some of the stories that were left out that are in the Bible, but we don't know about them. In particular, the dominant myth of our tradition is the Exodus myth, the myth that the Israelites were slaves in Egypt, and that through plagues, Moses forced Pharaoh to release them, and they wandered the desert, and they ended up in the land. But that is just the dominant myth. There were other myths around, other stories of origin, other explanations for why Israel ended up in the place that they were. And I wanted to share one of them with you, just a sliver of it. So I'm going to share the screen right now and share with you a passage from the Book of Chronicles. Here. Okay, do you see that?
Can you enlarge it?
Yeah, I can enlarge it.
Great, that's much better.
Okay, let's see if I can make it even bigger. Here. Okay, so there's a sliver of, the Book of Chronicles is not the books of Chronicles are not books that generally are taught are taught in school, and people ignore them, and they ignore them because a lot of that story exists in Book of Samuel and Kings. But if you look, the most interesting part of the Book of Chronicles, in my mind, are the first 10 chapters of Chronicles, where you have a lot of genealogies. And interspersed in those genealogies, you have little stories. And here's this little story about the sons of Ephraim, okay? So the sons of Ephraim, they list the sons of Ephraim: Shutelach, Bered, Tahat. And so the men of Gat is close to modern-day Tel Aviv, born in the land, killed them because they had gone down to take their cattle. And Ephraim, their father, mourned many days, and his brothers came to comfort him. Now, Ephraim, in the dominant myth, was born in Egypt. He would have had no opportunity to be in the vicinity of Tel Aviv, where his progeny would have had no opportunity to rustle cattle in the vicinity of Tel Aviv. And neither would Ephraim's brothers, who were also in Egypt, have the opportunity to come and comfort him. And so this sliver of tradition, and there are a number of other stories that confirm this, this sliver of tradition implies that the Israelites were never in Egypt, that Abraham came to the land, and then he had children and more children, and they just stayed, and they just became more and more prolific. There were more of them, and then eventually they conquered the land. And there are a number of slivers of tradition, of stories that confirm that view, that was one of the alternate myths. There's not just the Exodus and entrance myth, but also the myth of coming in and staying there. And so it's just so, the Bible is 930 chapters long, just has so many stories that you know, even people who have studied it for a long time, read it for a long time, don't know about them. And it's like, it's so, I see it as such a pleasure to bring, present those stories, the origins of stories that we knew well, that the origins are very different than what we have them now. And I would say that, you know, studying with Professor Malkin just has enabled me to frame and articulate why I want people to know more about this, why it's so important to know about this. That it's because these are our stories. It's the stories that help us bind us culturally as a people, and we might perceive them in very different ways, but they are our stories. So I am forever in Professor Malkin's debt, and I would have loved.
Thank you very much, Tzemah. Thank you very, very much for your presentation. And Josh, can you put the next video? Thank you, Tzemah.
I mean, knowledge is not very comfortable, but you don't die from it. And she believed him. She didn't believe God. She believed the Nachash. And she saw how beautiful it is to know. Nechmad lahaskil, it says in Hebrew, I cannot translate it. It is so cute, it's so nice to become knowledgeable. And she ate from the fruit, and humanity was saved from this terrible ignorance, from being like animals, from not knowing the difference between good and bad. In many ways, this myth competes with the myth of Prometheus. Prometheus also was in conflict with the gods when he brought the fire to humanity and made civilization possible. In our story, Eve, the first woman, or before she was even called Eve, brought knowledge to the humanity. This is the basic myth, that people who read it without any religious taboo, without any religious interpretation or obligation to read it with a religious interpretation, can read it as a story and can read it as a myth. Those who do believe in God as a just being have difficulties, of course. And therefore they had to make other interpretations. And in the wake of Augustinus' objection to women, let's put it in an understatement, they started to speak about the original sin of the woman or of human beings. Some of them started to believe that all of us are sinners because we are the children of this first terrible couple, the first man and the first woman. But according to the myth, read in what we call in Hebrew pshat, which means in plain Hebrew. Pshat is pashut. In plain Hebrew it says, he tried to make us ignorant, she saved us. Therefore Adam called her mother of all life. Mother Chava means em kol chai, mother of everything that lives. He complimented her because she did this wonderful deed, because we were liberated from the Garden of Eden and we started a real culture.
Yaakov Malkin says that most Jews are secular and they don't know it. As he further articulated it on other occasions, it really means that most people live a secular way of life, sovereign and free to make their own choices. And then he goes on to talk about liberal modern religions, claiming that most variations of modern Western liberal religion focuses on humanism. Think about it for a minute. If you think about the big battles of the reform movement and the conservative movement, this was about equality. It was about the fact that women and men could be rabbis, It was about the fact that women and men could pray, could lead prayer, could lead ceremonies. Now, this is not about God. This is not about making God happy, says Yaakov. This is about making people happy. He believed that humanism was cherished by so many people and became the most important value for religious people as well as secular people. He also explained that in order to be a secular humanist, it's not enough to be just one of them. In other words, it's not enough just to be secular. You have to be, or you should be, this combination of a secular and a humanist. And what did he mean by that? What he meant by that was that, as I mentioned before, for him to be secular meant that you are free, that you are sovereign to make your own valued choices. To make your own valued choices, the question is, what are your values? His answer would be humanism. So this link of humanism and secularity meant so much to him. It meant to him that not only do I understand what I ought to do, but I must do. I must function in this world to better my life, to better other people's life. So let's hear what he has to say about secularism. Josh?
We were together in the effort to make secular Judaism known to people who are secular. It's one of the paradoxes. Most Jews in the world are secular. They only don't know it. It is the old Molière saying, I never knew that I always talk prose. People who are secular but do not know how to articulate their beliefs feel confused for no reason. Our task is to make them articulate their beliefs. Because their beliefs are very clear. Their way of life expresses their beliefs. No matter what the surveys say. Every survey in the world, when you ask people, do you believe in God? They say, yes, I do believe in God. On condition that you don't ask another question, what do you mean? And because people do not believe in God as a personal commander or a personal creator of the world who can rule their life, they live a life without God. Therefore, I called also my book Judaism Without God, because this is the life we live. And through our life, we express our beliefs.
Professor Malkin wrote a few books on the topic, What do secular Jews believe? Claiming that their belief is anchored in humanistic values. So, as I mentioned, we're not just secular, we're humanists. We are secular, which means we are free and sovereign. We're Jewish, which means that we are part of a family and culture. We're humanists because we are believers. We're believers in the right to pursue happiness, in equality, and justice, and love, just to name a few. Yaakov Malkin used to say what you believe and do as you say. Well, this is how he lived and died. Today, we're fortunate to have with us the author of the New York Times best-selling book, Good Without God, What a Billion Non-Religious People Do Believe. Rabbi Greg M. Epstein is the current humanist chaplain at Harvard University and at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT. He's an ordained humanist rabbi, studied in Israel at the IISHJ Tmura Israeli Institute together with Professor Malkin. Rabbi Epstein has been influential in American humanism as a blogger, spokesman, advisor, and my friend. Please, Greg.
Thank you, Sivan, and hello to many old friends. It's been several years for some of you. The best teachers prepare you to leave them. You want to go back and back and have one more lecture, one more conversation, one more therapy session. They become rock stars in our minds, precisely because they're trying to prepare us for a world in which we won't have and we won't need their guidance or their wisdom. Yaakov Malkin was one of the greatest teachers I will ever encounter in my life. I would not be here with you today in the way that I am if he and Sivan, and of course the beautiful community that they built, many of you are represented on this Zoom session, had not come into my life in the way that you did. And you just allowed me to come back for more and more, and that started with Yaakov. I won't get into how exactly I knew him too much, just to say that I spent all told in my rabbinic training a year and a half in Israel, 14 months at one point during the first year of Tmura, and I was at that house. I was at that house week after week, multiple times a week, and Yaakov and his family, you fed me, you took care of me, you watched out for me, you taught me, but most importantly for the 23 or so year old version of me, or 25, 26-year-old version of me, you listened. He listened. Imagine having this amazing teacher, one of the greatest teachers you'll ever know, one of the greatest teachers anybody will ever know. And for me, as an insecure kid, he listened. It was worth billions of dollars. It was worth anything. But that's what he knew how to do. What you're about to watch, this next video, is a video of a truly genius teacher. Someone whose ethical insights would have actually earned him a place among the Geonim, literally the geniuses, as certain Talmudic sages are known. But you're about to see this teacher at the peak of his powers, preparing with all of his, I'll call it loving kindness, all of his compassion for this moment, for the moment that we are marking today, for his absence, for our experience of missing him. And if you learned with Yaakov Malkin, you miss him today. We're wishing for one more conversation. And very few teachers ever rise to the level where they can do that, where they can prepare us for the moment of missing them. And that's okay, by the way. I mean, one need not be a geon, a genius, to be an important mentor or friend or guide. But watch. In this next video, even in the first minute of the video, how Malkin, he takes on this challenge of preparing us for his own end with laughter. And it's not a self-congratulatory laughter. It may be more like the defiant, passionate laughter of Shaul Chernikovsky in the song Sachki. But to me, it's a humble, a simple, a playful laughter, the kind with which you reassure your own child, the kind that you'd share with your own beloved in a moment of genuine connection. To me, that's the ultimate use of the word believer, what he accomplishes through that laughter, through that subtle nonverbal communication. He's somebody, Yaakov Malkin was, who has worked so hard on himself, both as a teacher and as a loving human being, that they believe in themselves. He believes in himself at this moment of teaching in a deep way, a way that goes way beyond self-confidence or overconfidence. And therefore he encourages us to do the same about our own selves. And yet, you know, as I think you'll see, he's taking on the single toughest and most important philosophical problem in the world, the meaning of our death. And he does it in a way that's both completely faithful to the humanist tradition, to the Masoret of humanism, and from within and animated, both from within and animated by the life and the culture and the history of the Jewish people, but also the humanism that belongs to every human being who ever lived, not just who affiliated with a humanist movement. And yet he does this in a way, again, that few teachers, few humanists ever could, but in a way that we should all aspire to, even if we'll never get there quite. And that is the quiet, the gentle, the loving confidence that one has done all one can already. And yet, we see that, and that makes us long even more for one more conversation, one more moment of connection with him. You know, it's our tradition to be together, and this breaks that tradition, right? His absence breaks the tradition that we built of being with him that meant so much to us. And yet that's what he ends with, the reminder in preparing us for his absence that humanists break tradition because we can, because we must, because only through these dangerous and frightening steps into the future can we learn how to love even more, even better in the next generation than in the past. So before the video, I just want to leave you, we used to sing together, and the last time that I was able to sit with Professor Malkin and family, my family, we sang, they asked me to sing Hallelujah. And I'll just sing a verse from Hallelujah. And I want you to notice Leonard Cohen's genius, because it's similar, if not the exact same as Yaakov's genius. Note Cohen's humility, his humor, and the way that he laughs lovingly at his own death in this verse. I did my best, it wasn't much. I couldn't feel, so I tried to touch. I told the truth, I didn't come to fool you. And even though it all went wrong, I'll stand before the Lord of song with nothing on my tongue but hallelujah, 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 hallelujah.
המוות הוא בעצם מילה בשביל השם של המעבר מהיות לאי-היות. המוות הוא עין, הוא עינות מוחלטת של אותו אדם שמת. אפיקורס אמר, במקום שאני נמצא אין מוות. במקום שאני הווה בעצם אין מוות. במקום שיש מוות אני אינני. בכך תרם אפיקורוס לשחרור מחרדת המוות. כי חרדת המוות היא בעצם החרדה מן החיים הנצחיים המתחילים במוות לפי אמונות דתיות. באמונה הלא דתית או האתאיסטית של אפיקורוס, כיוון שהמוות הוא מעבר מהיות לאי-היות, וממילא לא אל חיים חדשים שיש בהם עינויים וגיהינום, אלא אל אי היות, אל אי סבל, אל אי כאב, למוות נלווית הישארות הנפש. הישארות הנפש באותו מובן שהרמב"ם הבין אותה במורה נבוכים, כאשר דיבר על התמזגות תבונת האדם עם תבונת העולם שבשבילו היה האלוהים. הישארות הנפש היא הישארות נפשי בנפשם של אוהביי, הישארות נפשי בנפשם של אהוביי. הישארות הנפש היא שהם יכולים להמשיך את השיח גם אחרי שהדיבור נגמר. המוות קשור אמנם בעצב הפרידה. פרידה מידידים, פרידה מאוהבים, פרידה מעצמי. אני כבר לא אכיר את עצמי ולא אדע את עצמי ולא אדע שאני חי או שאני הווה אחרי מותי. כי האדם הוא אולי היצור היחידי בעולם שיכול להיות לא רק להיות, אלא גם לדעת שהוא הווה, שהוא ישנו. האדם הוא היצור היחידי שיכול להבין את המוות ואת מה שיקרה אחרי המוות. עצב הפרידה מאוהבים ומידידים ומעצמי מתמזג גם בתקווה. בתקווה כי ידידים ואוהבים יזכרו את המת, יזכרו את אנושיותו, את אישיותו, יזכרו ואולי יכירו את יצירותיו, כיוון שהאדם הוא היחידי אשר יכול ביצירות רוחניות לחולל תמורות. תמורות בחיים שלו, של היוצר, ובחיים של אלה הנהנים מיצירותיו, לא רק בחייו, אלא גם אחרי מותו. היצירות אשר בהם אנחנו מביעים את חיינו, היצירות הרוחניות שבהם אנחנו מביעים את מחשבותינו ואת הגותנו, הם חלק מהירושה שאנחנו מורישים לאלה שהמשיכו להיות כשאנחנו כבר לא נהיה. האדם הוא היחידי שיכול לסטות מן המסורת. מותר האדם הוא היכולת לוותר על המסורת. כל החיות האחרות בעולם כנועות, משועבדות, למסורת אשר הטבע קבע עליהם, כפה עליהם. כל החיות חייבות להתנהג כהוריהן והורי הוריהן. האדם הוא היחידי היכול לא רק לחיות בסביבה טבעית, אלא לשנות את הסביבה הטבעית. היכול לא רק לחיות בסביבה חברתית, אלא לשנות את הסביבה החברתית. וזה הוא יכול לעשות גם בחייו וגם אחרי מותו. ומכאן התקווה המתלווה לעצב הפרידה. ומכאן התקווה הנובעת ממותר האדם. ומכאן גם הכוח של האהבה שהוא חזק מן המוות. הכוח של האהבה המתמזגת עם זיכרון החיים ועם זיכרון המתים. הכוח של האהבה הגורם לתקווה גם כאשר אנחנו נפגשים במוות, גם כאשר אנחנו חווים אותו.
Well, thank you. Thank you to my wonderful niece, Noga, that actually made this movie. Thank you to friends that helped with adding the translation, to my brother who actually did the translation. Thank you to my husband, Iftach, who did the branding and the design for this event and the next event. Thank you to my colleague, Adam, who put the program together with me today. Thank you to our guests and dear friends, Elyse and Tzemah and Greg and Adam. Thank you, Josh Berg for administrating this. Thank you, Paul Golin from the Society for Humanistic Judaism and Rabbi Miriam Jarris in enabling more and more people to actually have access to watch this. Thank you, family. Thank you, friends as family. And I am inviting you now to our next program, the pink slide.
The link is in the chat.
And the link is in the chat. It will start at 8:15. It's almost 8 o'clock now, so another 15 minutes. The program is in Hebrew, but it does involve singing and some theater. All of you are invited. You do not have to register ahead of time. You could just press the link. So thank you very much. Shalom, be well, and lots of love from Jerusalem.